goblin? Are you short and insecure? Do you have a long, crooked nose and beady little eyes? And grubby, slimy, crooked fingers and nasty, twisted feet? And gross skin and you smell bad? Well, some of you fit this description, but for the most part, you probably would answer this by saying, "No, I'm not a goblin." But are you sure? I mean, you might not look like a goblin. But from what I've seen the last few months, a lot of people are acting like goblins. It's quite impressive how news media and politics put a spell over you people with just a few stupid words and video footage. People go from being mindless drones into maniacal, vile wretches, trying to scratch off the flesh of any human who dares challenge them. It seems like everyone wants their political opinions to be heard nowadays, and even more, they want to be confronted and attacked so they can say, "See, look what they did. I was right." There's hordes of special needs escapees going around standing on freeways, setting fires to burger places. There's gangs of mega-fats and flappy-armed butchesses screeching about how literally everything is fascist, including exercise. And there's mentally disabled pseudo-Christian patriots running around with their stupid little US flags, claiming they're just trying to have a prayer circle, or fighting for freedom of speech, or whatever. We've got privileged color youths bashing out windows, demanding some sort of return of Jim Crow laws, and uppity little communistic white boys egging it all on. And it's all over what? Because that shifty media machine crunches out bullshit to get you to make them money through your viewership? You see, when Alex Jones called the elites goblins, he wasn't giving them enough credit. The elites are literal warlocks and wizards. The people who subscribe to the elitist media are goblins. The media they watch are literal spells put into their tiny heads to make them lash out with violence and to create little pockets of chaos to attempt to devastate stability. The reason for them to make the people act in such a way are various. It could be to influence policies. Maybe they do it in hopes advertisers can make a few bucks. It could even be because, maybe, they actually do believe there is an injustice that must be met with violence. What I believe is that the elites and their media are almost pure evil. I've personally met people with power, or rather, had power, who told me they are evil. And positions of power and influence make their hearts glow with joy. Nothing satisfies them more than the ability to use their power to cause chaos and suffering. They get off to the idea that their efforts in making it into the restricted networks of mass propaganda engineering will be rewarded with permission to manipulate and hijack the minds of millions to serve them in creating a world they've always imagined. These people fantasize to the thought of you and your family getting raped and tortured by people who they control, not just because they love suffering and power, but because they have an animosity towards and fear of goodness and innocence, because they are blind to the concept of what is good and see it as a threat to their power, and anyone who goes against them deserves pain and ridicule and invaluable loss and deprivation. These are the people who produce the news and fund political and cultural platforms and publish the smears and verified opinions of their most noble goblins and encourage division and conflict with no end so long as there is someone who threatens the production of the movie script we're all supposed to play along in. But enough about the elites. I'd like to talk about you, because without you, they'd have no authority, or power, or influence. Their nasty little dominance fantasies wouldn't manifest had you not come along and participated in their games. And the excuse that you were born into the system, or have no choice, it only goes so far for so long, especially if you made it as far as to find the abandoned sons of Adam. But even if you go as far as to claim you're against the establishment and are against the media, you still operate as a player in their game. So for you, let me give you a little test. Alright, I'm gonna say a word. I want you to say the first thing that comes to mind. Protest. Equality. Electoral. Systematic. Cancel. Safety. Injustice. Revolution. Fascism. Peaceful. Okay, now I got a few statements. I want you to tell me how much they sound like something you'd say. First one. If the shooter was white, the media would call him racist. Antifa are the real fascists. When the left does it, it's alright. Fuck around and find out. If protesters block the street, I'll drive through them. That's not a protest, that's a riot. So it's okay for Black Lives Matter to not wear masks, but the churches and Trump rallies have to be shut down? If the protesters come to my neighborhood, they'll meet the barrel of my gun. Almost done. What do you say we have a look at this? Tell me what you see. Let's go back just 5 or 6 years ago. Donald Trump was still some presidential candidate used as a joke by the political media. Hillary Clinton was practically walking to the presidential throne with no real threat to her power, other than some rambling socialist man with crazy hair and an argumentative accent. The establishment had already planned their vision for the world and simply had to wait for Obama to hand over executive power to Clinton, their charming, popular priestess representative. The pedophile elites were already planning their next blood orgies, and the cultural architects had prepared for us a genderless, cashless, godless, open border world with a fixed international two-class economy. But things simply didn't work as planned. The executive power fell into the hands of a Donald Trump, a man who had no interest in the new world waiting for us. It's at this point the establishment went into a frenzy and quickly began deteriorating before our eyes, and the people began to see just how evil the establishment was, at least for that moment. Hyper-nationalism and traditionalism saw a spike of support across social media, and the establishment media had to react quickly in order to say what was left of their power. It's here we saw the mass censorship and the banning of outspoken individuals. And for the last few years, this has remained, and the establishment has stabilized even in its weakened state. The heart of the elite still kicks through television channels, websites, podcasts, music, your precious Netflix, public figures on Twitter, and through the mouths of politicians who speak on behalf of the establishment. And while they have little government power, they dominate mainstream culture. You see, while it may appear that mass riots and protests and counter-protests and so on are happening all over the country, the reality is a massive chunk of the population has not experienced any of it. It's because of this they have chosen to unleash the goblins. And yes, including yourself. How it works is simple. Let me give the greatest example. The media enrages its supporting class by focusing on a black man being shot by police. The people protest and become goblins, shouting their little slogans and flashing their crappy little finger-painted signs. Then, establishment warlocks working in local government limit the police powers and encourage more protests. At this point, protests are enabled to become riots. The white boys in black come out and start breaking stuff, and when others see that the police aren't arresting them, they too join in. Eventually, businesses are destroyed, infrastructure is damaged, roads have become covered in debris. You've seen it. But now, here's the trick. The media who encouraged the protest hardly mention the people affected by the protests turn riots, thus giving the illusion that the protest was peaceful. Mostly. Unless you're paying attention, close attention to the riots and following independent journalists, if you're just some cog 9-to-5 cable watching drone, which these people make up a vast majority of the population, you'll assume the protests were just, well, protests. With the exception of some local outlets, the news didn't tell you millions of dollars worth of property was destroyed and businesses were ruined, along with the incomes and profits of the people who worked at these businesses, who relied on the money to survive. Everything is fine. But you're clever. You know what's going on. You saw the destruction and violence. You didn't just sit back and eat up the cable news. You got down to the bottom of it and saw what's really going on. You and maybe a few million others here in the US. So you go onto Twitter or the Facebook or upload videos about it. Next thing you know, you're banned. Maybe just shadow banned. Or maybe they threaten to ban you if you continue to spread your naughty messages about the riots. At this point, you're angered. How dare they censor the truth? Am I right? So now, you caring so much about the truth, take to the streets. You're gonna counter-protest. You've lost your internet, and now you've been driven out into the streets. You're now a goblin as well. And here's where the trick gets kinda funny. You go out there with your little flag, or your sign, or your cool little American flag face mask, and you start giving it to the protesters. Then, some scrawny little white boy punches you. You recoil and defend yourself. You throw a punch back, and next thing you know, you're on all of social media and even the establishment news. And the headline doesn't even say, "Man defends himself from rioter." Oh no. It says, "White supremacist assaults Black Lives Matter protester." And the people writing the story won't even mention that you were attacked first, or that you're not really a white supremacist. All they need is a photo of you swinging at someone. And this is the narrative that gets delivered to those cogs who make up the majority of this nation's population. They're not going to research what really happened to you. They're not gonna wonder if there was more to the story. All they'll know is that a racist punched some poor protester who was standing up for those poor black people. And every other establishment media website, news show, and podcast is going to regurgitate this same story and make it seem like it's far more important than it really is. And every time someone else like you goes out to counter the protest, the media will do it again and again and again. Eventually, they'll have enough coverage to make it seem as if there's a pandemic of white supremacy. And here, the establishment politicians will use their media as evidence that there is, in fact, a racist pandemic sweeping America. And the only way to stop it is to bring back those elitist-approved politicians, the Clintons, the Bidens, the Obama people. They'll save the COG population from white supremacists. All they gotta do is vote them back in, and the new world will continue as planned. They'll stop racism from taking over the US. The elites aren't dumb. They need you to go out there and clash with their Jamals and wannabe Che Guevaras so their media lemmings can snap a photo of you throwing a punch, or crashing a peaceful protest, or drawing a firearm on a group of just-a-tears. They need you to goblin up and join the script. It's how they'll regain government power. So, is the solution to just sit back and let the goblinos and commies attack you? No. But let me ask you, have you been attacked by goblins? Have you seen any heading your way? Likely not. But if it happens, defend yourself. However, the truth is, most of us aren't going to be overtaken by rioters. They destroy their own communities with small fringes heading into the suburbs. So then, where did you get this idea that commie BLM militias are taking over the entire nation? These people are in full force right now and can't even manage to take over Seattle. So why are you so scared? What made you fear? Who made you fear? The mainstream media didn't tell you that they're taking over the US. They told you there's only peaceful protests. You convinced yourself of this out of fear with your peers. You've put yourself into an information loop that's driven you to work on behalf of the media you despise. The time you spent fingering your butthole to the riots and misinformation spread on social media, you could have read a book. You could have planted a garden. You could have worked out. You could have reinforced your home to better your chances of survival if your worst fears did come true. You could have done many things to your benefit. You could have taught yourself how to create fine art, or gone to visit your families, or make friends with your neighbors. You could have fixed your car, or built a wood stove, or taught yourself how to play an instrument. You could have done any one of these things instead of seething over the establishment media. Remember that test I gave you earlier? Those are all simple words that, just several years ago, wouldn't have made you spiral into anger. Those images would have been more of a concern than something to obsess over. Had you not given attention to the media you don't trust anyways, you wouldn't sit there on your phone or computer for hours every single day blowing steam out of your ears. It's pathetic imagining you sitting there on Twitter or Facebook typing a reply to someone, "I'm not a fascist. You're a fascist." Shut the fuck up. I have good news for you though. Their system will continue as it will until it destroys itself, however long it may take. There's no need to go out and engage with goblins. Pay no attention to the mindless, weak minority population who demands resources from the establishment through their screechings and poster board signs and their basketball games and tactless advertisements and crappy art murals, because they'll perish along with the hand that feeds them. Whether or not the new world arrives, your priorities should revolve around yourself, and should revolve around knowing yourself. I'm Ryu from ASA, and thanks for not being a goblin.